It is go time in the NFL, as we're recording just 2 hours into the official free agency period. The Seahawks stunned the football world by trading not only Geno Smith and DK Metcalf, but by signing Sam Darnold as well. I'm joined by one of the men at the center of it all, Seahawks beat reporter and the founder of Emerald City Spectrum, Corbin Smith. Let's light him up. I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts. Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my restricted free agent producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. And look, the trades, the signings, they're coming in at a furious rate right now, and I am excited to break it all down with Corbin. But before we get to that, I want to shout out two fantastic supporters of the show. As you know, Cigar Thoughts is proud to be partnered with Seattle Cigar Concierge and Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, two companies whose products I enjoy on a regular basis. And look, you guys know the deal. The Cigar Thoughts cigars, they're fantastic, and it's not just me saying so. The feedback has been awesome. You can get your own bundle of 10 for just $149 using the link on the show page or by going to cigarthoughtsnfl.com. They're an excellent way to kick back and enjoy, and they make a great gift for the stogie lover in your life. Mike and I love doing the show, and there are two ways y'all listening and watching can help support it so that we can keep these episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, and the other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like, and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. Now, we're recording this early on Monday afternoon, and the NFL news is already flying around like debris in a tornado. And when I reached out to today's guest last week, it was because he's been at ground zero for all of the DK Metcalf rumors leading up to the weekend. But now, we have so much more to talk about, and I couldn't be happier to have him with me. You know him for his work on the Seahawks beat, as the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, and as the founder of the incredible new Seattle sports site, Emerald City Spectrum. He is Corbin Smith. Corbin, welcome back, buddy.
Happy Monday. Happy tampering day.
This is like the NFL's version of the purge. It's like everything that was illegal is now legal for a limited time.
Even though we know that it was already going on.
It's so funny too, because it's like for a number of years, you know, on this day, the first day of the legal tampering period, you would see all the news releases and all the insiders saying, you know, it's being reported that in theory teams have agreed on terms with so-and-so. And now they're just not even pretending. They're just like, yep, Devontae Adams going to the Rams.
Well, at least in that case with a released player can sign before the tampering period. But there's been so many, you're right though. There's so many of these deals that, although this year with X functioning like the rockets for Elon Musk, it feels like this has all been a really stalled out process compared to what we're normally used to.
Totally. And I was watching NFL Network, been watching it kind of all day, just trying to stay in the loop of things. And they were all saying that too. I mean, Twitter right now, it's like trying to break news on a fax machine. It's just not working. But fortunately, we got Blue Sky. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, lots of other opportunities to stay abreast of the situation. And I'm going to preface this by saying to the listeners and the viewers out there, by the time you're listening and watching this, there may be other news that broke. Both Corbin and I are going to be keeping one eye on the news as we go. If anything happens while we're recording, we will jump on it. But a lot has happened in the days and hours leading up to us being on the show. And let's just start with the most recent and part of the biggest news. The Seattle Seahawks signed Sam Darnold. Corbin, thoughts?
You know, I don't know what to make of this signing necessarily, Jacson, because I understand what he did last year. And if you turn on the tape, there's a lot of really good stuff with Sam Darnold in Kevin O'Connell's offense. 35 touchdown passes, 7.9 yards per attempt. And contrary to the narrative, the last 2 games of the season backed this up. The pressure was relentless, and Darnold struggled mightily in the playoff loss to the Rams and in the season finale. But he actually was really good against pressure most of this last season. He had 13 passing touchdowns when he was pressured this year, according to Pro Football Focus. The completion percentage wasn't great, 49%, but he made a lot of big throws. He was in the top 5 in big-time throws from PFF when he was pressured. So the idea that he didn't get anything done against pressure is not necessarily true. The last couple of games are going to give you recency bias on that front, but also remember the Seahawks game, the game-winning touchdown against Seattle to Justin Jefferson.
Yes.
He slipped away from multiple pass rushers and rolled out and threw across his body on that throw. So there are plenty of examples where he's been able to do that. I don't think he's near as good as Geno Smith when it comes to navigating a pressured pocket. I think that there's a difference there. The Seahawks are going to have to build around him more to make this successful. If they would have given Sam Darnold $35 to $40+ million per year, I would have probably given this a C- just because I think Geno Smith is the better quarterback of the two. But Sam Darnold's 27. He has the physical tools, former top 5 pick. And now you're looking at a deal where really it looks to me like it's a 2-year, $55 million deal.
That's right.
And that gives you flexibility, and it does not deter you from drafting a quarterback in April. We could see a Michael Penix 2.0 type thing if the right guy is there, where John Schneider could go up and get, say, a Jackson Dart, or if Shedeur Sanders falls. They could do something like that, and nobody would bat an eye, while you still have a quarterback that could, in theory, be your signal caller the next 10 years because he's only 27 years old. So I understand why the Seahawks pivoted here. It's still crazy to me how everything went down with Geno Smith going to the Raiders. And honestly, that was more of a shocker than when Russell Wilson got traded a few years ago.
Yeah. I don't hate the move as much as I thought I was going to when it was announced that Geno Smith was being traded, and then that news was immediately followed by a lot of folks who cover the NFL basically saying it's being assumed that Sam Darnold is going to be the next quarterback of the Seahawks. And I was worried that we were going to be talking about guaranteed money closer to Kirk Cousins' $90 million or $100 million that he was guaranteed. And anytime you see this news broken, it is agents leaking that information to the insiders, to the press. And so it's going to be agent coded language. So you see 3 years, was it 100 million or 110?
100.5.
100.5. So you see that. And even that's reasonable for Sam Darnold, I think. But really you have to look under the hood, and what you see is 55 million guaranteed. And I think 36 of it is this year. So you've got, if it goes poorly, you get out of it for $19 million. That's honestly the cost of doing business to move on from quarterbacks these days. So that's okay. If he gives you 2 years, you can get out of it perfectly clean, no issues, maybe get a comp pick out of the deal. So it keeps some flexibility. My issue with trading Geno Smith is twofold. One is you have a 10-win roster that was basically good enough to win the division last year. They lost on the 5th tiebreaker. And now you're seeing the 49ers start to retool. The Cardinals have been tripping on their own dicks for 20 years in a row. They've got picks and draft capital and all that stuff, but I'll believe it when I see it from them. You got the Rams pushing all in on old players right now. They're fragile. They're good, but they're fragile. This division is there for the taking, and they're moving on from, in my opinion, the 2 best players on their offense. The other part of my hesitation and dislike for the Geno trade was that this is not the year to be finding the next quarterback. This is, by all accounts, a very shallow quarterback class in the draft. We all know what was out there via trade or free agency. Sam Darnold was the best. They made the most of it. I think he was the best quarterback available. My fear was that they were going to make a long-term quarterback decision in a terrible year to be making long-term quarterback decisions. And they didn't. There's potential that they thread the needle here, and it keeps them flexible to draft or trade for or sign a true quarterback of the future if Sam Darnold is not that next year or the year after.
It definitely gives them some flexibility. There's no question about it. And I think the one thing that we have to look at, those extra picks that they acquired for Geno Smith and DK Metcalf, those extra day 2 selections. Let's say that Shedeur Sanders falls out of the top 10. And Sanders does a lot of things that John Schneider in the past has liked about quarterbacks. Let's say that he plunges out of the top 10. And at that stage, John Schneider says, you know what, I'm going to package one of my seconds and one of my thirds up there with my first rounder. We're just going to slide up. Let's go get our QB of the future. You can have Shedeur Sanders sit for a year. And if Sam Darnold ends up doing great, then you've got a trade chip for the next season potentially. So it does give you a lot more flexibility. If Darnold doesn't play well, or he's not playing at a level where you're like, this guy we think is going to be our starter long term, then you can obviously turn it to Shedeur Sanders real quickly. There are teams that have been able to do that. You also have the flexibility to move some of those picks around to get higher picks in 2026, which looks like it is going to be a significantly better quarterback class. If I'm running the Seahawks, that's what I'm trying to do. Unless you get in a position, let's say Jackson Dart isn't picked in the first 20 picks and you are able to move to the back end of the first round for him, that may be a sequence where I would say, okay, the board fell my way, which John Schneider's talked about constantly. Well, the board has never fallen our way with quarterbacks. That's why we haven't drafted any of them. If that happened and you were able to move up, then you can go get Jackson Dart if that's the guy that you're wanting to draft. So that would be the only caveat here. But I think that now with this signing, the chances of them moving up for one of these QBs in this draft is pretty slim to none. I would think if they're going to be doing anything, they're going to try to jockey for position for 2026 when they could get one of the top quarterbacks that year.
That would be the smart move, I feel like. And just to highlight the nature of the environment we're recording this in, as of 6 seconds ago, the Texans have finalized a trade of 5-time Pro Bowl left tackle Laramie Tunsil to the Commanders. So we got Washington pushing all in, and we've got the Texans who have been right there in the divisional round the last 2 years. Their bugaboo also being offensive line just got a lot worse. So I'll be very curious to see how that shakes down. But it just speaks to the environment within which we are recording this show, and we may have some Seahawks news that breaks while we're here. Again, we're going to be keeping one eye on that. But Corbin, to your point, it sounds like you and I are in lockstep when it comes to what the Seahawks can do. They did not paint themselves into as tight of a corner as I was afraid they were going to do here. And look, I've been very hard on John Schneider over the last few days. Some of that's emotional, but I do think most of it is grounded in how I believe teams should be built and how they should capitalize on their contention window, which I believe Seattle was in and hopefully are still in. But it's something where if they can use this cap space and use these picks to build the house for their quarterback to move into, this all works out. I struggle with John Schneider's track record with the offensive line to just say, oh, hey, he's got picks and money now. Now we'll get it fixed. Because I think it lets Schneider off the hook in saying that, well, he wasn't able to build an offensive line before because he had Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. And I want to make extremely clear, nothing about Geno Smith or DK Metcalf's earnings as Seahawks have prevented a GM from building a competent offensive line. There's just been miss after miss. But now, no excuses because you have the picks and you have the money. The credit I will give to John Schneider is he landed the plane beautifully in the wake of the Russell Wilson trade. And maybe it was luck, maybe it was incredible foresight, but his ability to transition from Russell Wilson at the peak of his value and buy low on Geno Smith and get what we've seen over the last 3.5 years from Geno Smith. He does deserve credit for that.
Yeah, he deserves some credit on that front. What I'm really curious to see here, though, Jacson, is I've kind of been hinting at this the last few weeks with John Schneider. Being at the interviews of the Combine, speaking with him earlier in the offseason, and getting this sense, listening to the interviews he's been doing in Seattle sports, I've gotten the sense that he has been kind of hinting at that we may need to spend more money, overpay on the offensive line this year. And that maybe they were going to reallocate some of this money towards the front line. Where the issue is, though, is then you think about 2020 when the Seahawks went Joker mode with their money and basically lit $68 million in cap space on fire. It was one of the worst free agent classes that Schneider's had, which is saying something because we've seen some really bad ones. But is he going to reallocate money in this free agent period where he's actually going to invest in one of the top guards that's still available? Is he going to go out and get a Will Freeze or somebody like that to plug into that starting lineup that can be a real difference maker, which he just has not been willing to do? You have no excuse now. You got rid of your quarterback. Yep. You got rid of one of your best playmakers on offense, and DK Metcalf. You're going to have to reinvent your offense, and the run game's going to have to be part of it. So to make that work, you have got to have a better offensive line. You went out and got coaches that have an experienced track record with offensive linemen, but it doesn't matter if you don't have the personnel there. You've got to get proven commodities in there to work with some of these young guys and let this new group of coaches be able to coach them up and at least have a mid-tier offensive line. Because if you can do that, you can mitigate some of the loss with your passing game. But if they can't run the ball much better than last year, it's not going to matter what Sam Darnold does. They're going to be in a really tricky spot to be able to contend at all in the NFC West. So they have got to get that offensive line taken care of. No more being cheap and looking for Luke Jokel deals. You got to go out and get somebody that's a proven commodity to improve this offensive line.
Yeah. And, I want to tie your last point back into the Sam Darnold acquisition. There is a case to be made that Sam Darnold, who, like a lot of quarterbacks, has had his best success in play action. Clint Kubiak is an extremely play action friendly offensive coordinator. So if you don't look any further than that, it seems like there's a potential good fit there. And it's very easy to look at the analytics and say, well, more play action is better because EPA is higher on play action. Success rate is higher on play action. Yards per play is higher on play action. But you can't run it if you can't block, because true play action requires for you to get your quarterback under center, a yard away from the defense, take that snap, and then turn his back to that defense, fake the handoff, and then set and go through his reads. And the reason we didn't see more of it with Geno Smith in Seattle, I am convinced, is because how are you going to call that play when he has an average of 2.4 seconds to throw a football? You run play action, 1.8 of those seconds is gone already. So unless they really beef up the interior of this offensive line, and this is presuming Abe Lucas is healthy, I don't see how this Clint Kubiak offense is going to work with Sam Darnold. Like the challenge is, look, we've gone too far, I think, as fans in elevating cap space and draft picks. Like, just get more cap space, get more draft picks. Well, the purpose of cap space and draft picks is to use them on good players. And so now you have to, because you don't have a quarterback who has shown that he can still remain competent, viable, and sometimes excellent under extreme pressure, because that's what you had in Geno Smith.
Yeah, you're right on that, Jacson. And that was the biggest reason why, the guys on KJR, they called me, I believe they called me the king of the Geno Smith club. Like I've been defending Geno. And listen, it's not because I have connections as a PR person for Geno Smith. I just think he's a good quarterback. I think he's better than a lot of fans.
Listen, man, every single person we've had on this show has come on and said he is a good quarterback, both local and national. He's a good quarterback. You are right about that. And
so that's been something that, there's a lot of fans. Listen, players can say they don't listen to fans at all, or they don't listen to noise. I would not be shocked if Geno Smith wanted to go to the Raiders because, quite frankly, he was getting sick of all the crap that was out there from fans. I would not be shocked about it. And we know that he uses social media. We see it. We know that he uses social media. And I'm sorry, but we should, I know guys they're going to say, hey, players, you're making millions and millions of dollars. You should be able to ignore the noise. There does come a point, though, where it's really difficult to play that ignore card, even as a quarterback of an NFL team. So I'm not saying that that's what's going on. That's just me spitballing here. But I could see that being part of it where, the Raiders don't have fans, so you don't have to worry about them talking smack about your play necessarily. That's a low joke. There's plenty of Raiders fans. But my point being here, I think Geno Smith is a better quarterback than most fans were willing to acknowledge. And so I still have some skepticism about how they're going to move forward here with Sam Darnold, even though I think there were some good things that he put together last year and obviously had a better statistical season. He also had a very ideal set of circumstances around him. Geno Smith did not have that. Yep. And I would have loved to see what Geno Smith looked like in that Vikings offense last year, what he would have done with that group.
Oh, are you kidding me?
It's one of those things that you just don't necessarily – I just think that these fans don't necessarily understand the intricacies of the game. Some of them don't. And I just feel like Geno Smith is a better quarterback than most people believe. I think that the Raiders know that. And the Raiders have a chance, if they can get some weapons for him, to make that a very interesting division with 3 already good playoff caliber teams. And I think he's that kind of QB.
Oh, man, there is real juice in the building, man. You look at the last number of months for the Raiders, a moribund franchise hasn't had anything to get really excited about in 2 decades. And then all of a sudden, Tom Brady's in the house. Pete Carroll is in the house. Chip Kelly is in the house. You bring in John Spytek as your GM, who has a really impressive resume. And you re-sign Max Crosby to, who I got to imagine is the number one guy for Raiders fans. There is juice there that hasn't been there in a couple of decades. And good for Geno to go back to the coach that gave him the chance that no one else in the NFL gave him for a decade. It seems like a really great fit there. And I'm super happy for him. But if you're the king of the Geno Smith fan club, I am the king of the DK Metcalf fan club.
Yes, absolutely you are, Jacson.
I am. And I bristle at the idea that that's unreasonable, because at no point have I said he's Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. But to hear the way Seahawks fans have talked about DK Metcalf shows what it is that we focus on. And people are talking about a fumble or personal fouls, which, by the way, he had 1 of last season, or whatever attitude issues that to me are completely narrative. I've had enough conversations with you and your colleagues on the beat to say that's not something that was felt in the locker room. But even I am okay with letting someone else pay $150 million to DK Metcalf. I think it's a good move by the Steelers. I get Seattle not wanting to necessarily pay that. I would have been fine with it, but I get it. It's 4 years, $132 million new money. I haven't heard the guarantee yet, but you have been on the DK Metcalf rumors from the get-go. You have been ground zero for this, and that's why I'm so excited to have you on. The impression I get, and I am so open to you telling me that I'm off base here, so don't hesitate to do that. Impression I got when his agent is essentially putting it out there that he's looking for stability at the quarterback position. That was with Geno Smith still under contract with the Seahawks. Do you think that Metcalf knew that Geno was moving on? Do you feel like maybe the two of them weren't completely copacetic? Or do you feel like that was just something that the agent was putting out there to try and create leverage with?
Jacson, I'm kind of torn on this at this point, because if you would have asked me this question before that trade went down, everybody that I had talked to said that Metcalf and Smith were tight But then if you go back and you watch some of the games last year, I'm going to throw a play out there for you. The 49ers game at Lumen Field where DK ran, it clearly was the wrong route, or it was a sloppy route. Geno Smith expected that he was going to be crossing tightly across the field, and he just kind of faded, and it allowed that corner to jump in front and pick him
100%.
up. And if you watch the TV copy, which we have access to that in the press box, and I looked up at the TV, and you could just tell by the body language that Geno Smith, he's obviously going to take the sword because he always did. And that's what quarterbacks do.
To be fair, DK totally did after the game also.
Yeah, they both took the sword on that play. So, but listen, you could see the body language with Geno Smith there that it was like, you were supposed to be cutting up. I threw that pass because I expected you to be there. So there were some issues on the field in terms of communication. I think there were some times Metcalf felt like he was open and Geno didn't get him the ball. So there may have been some stuff going on there that was beyond the fact that, I don't think they had issues with one another in terms of people. I just don't know necessarily at this point with some of the stuff I've heard the past few days if the fit was necessarily there. And I also think Metcalf, he and his representatives knew what was going on here. They knew that John Schneider, maybe he wasn't actively, as I reported initially, he was not actively trying to trade DK Metcalf. But there were teams trying to see what the availability was at. And negotiations, money-wise, the gap was pretty large there. So you add in all those factors, and then that turns into, you know what? You're already talking to teams about me. Well, I want out of here. And then you're going to have all these different storylines that come out from agent talk standpoint. I do think it's ironic that all these reports said he wanted to go somewhere with warm weather and a stable quarterback situation.
I think it was Greg Rosenthal who said that was not actually a part of the thing.
John Schneider's like, I'm going to do what's best for the team. Well, he got that second round pick from the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers maybe have Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback next year. And we know that the Steel City is not known for tropical paradise. So he didn't get any of that stuff, but he did get the bag. And at the end of the day, that is really, to me, what was the driving factor behind this.
Once you get to 9 figures, I don't think climate matters anymore.
You pay me $150 million.
I'll go anywhere you want, baby.
In the middle of Montana.
I'll go anywhere you want for that kind of money. And you know what? He deserves it. And Pittsburgh fans, if you're tuning into this to get some DK info, just know you got a dog, man. And I hope you appreciate him. I hope you appreciate him more than a lot of Seahawks fans have here. And it's easy to overlook what Metcalf's actual production was. I'm going to get to that in a second. But I also want to talk about the fact that so much of the criticism of DK Metcalf comes from him going 101% on every play. So many of his penalties are him blocking through the whistle. His fumbles almost always happen because he's got 3 hyenas on his back and 2 more scrapping at the football because he's still on his feet 5 yards further down the field than any other receiver would have been after catching the football. His personal fouls are because he's blocking his ass off. It's easy to forget that his dad was an offensive lineman for the Bears. Like, this guy understands what it means to be a football player. He's a football player playing wide receiver more so than he is a wide receiver playing football. And y'all got a dog, man. He is good. And when it comes to production, the best first 6 years by every measure of any Seahawks receiver in history. Of all receivers in all of the years the NFL has existed that have played at least 4 playoff games, DK Metcalf leads all of them in yards per game in the playoffs. He has 5 touchdowns in those 4 games. This guy performed big in big moments. How many game-winning touchdowns has he had against the Rams, against the Vikings in big games, scoring touchdowns at the end when the team needed it, being the guy that Russell Wilson or Geno Smith looked to in those big moments. So I'm going to be rooting for the Steelers. I'm going to be rooting for the Raiders. And I'm really, really hoping that Schneider can land the plane when it comes to moving on from those two guys. But I will say I'm encouraged on the defensive side of the football. We'll see what they do with the offensive line. But they re-signed Jarran Reed and Ernest Jones. I love the Ernest Jones contract, especially in the shadow of what Nick Bolton got in Kansas City. I thought that's what it was going to take to get, and I think that was like 3 years. I can't remember what Bolton
45
signed
million.
for, but
it was a
345 and 30 guaranteed,
contract.
right? 30 guaranteed. Ernest Jones signed for half of that guaranteed. That's a huge win. Jarran Reed has been an exceptional run defender over the last few years, and I like that he's sticking around for very stomachable money. It does feel like Mike Macdonald has his prints all over this defense.
It does. Yeah, and I think when you look at the personnel on defense, they have set themselves up now that Reed and Jones are back under contract. You're really looking at the majority of the playmakers from when they were a top 5 defense scoring wise the last 8 games last year. Those players are all going to be back. And then you have guys like Devin Witherspoon going into year 3 that I think Mike Macdonald's going to be able to fully unlock him this year. And Julian Love, Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was a revelation last year at the safety spot. He might be somebody they extend and have both their safeties locked up. And Reek Woolen still feels like there's so much more to squeeze out of him, and yet he still had really good numbers last year. If you looked at his stat line, like pass breakups, interceptions, didn't give up a ton of big plays. I mean, it's crazy.
His separation stats are really good too, in terms of how little separation he allowed to the receivers he was covering.
Yeah, and I think you also have a guy in Josh Jobe that they just re-signed that had a really good run there that they're going to be trying to get locked in as they're one of their other starters there. This team's got the horses on defense to be – and listen, that is why I was flabbergasted by the timing of some of these moves that the Seahawks have made, because you had all these defensive guys in the primes of their career. You had that nucleus together, and now you're starting with a different quarterback. And again, Darnold's played in a similar system, but you're doing that without Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. You've got your questions on the offensive line. This is a team that has been saying the last several months, we are an ascending team. And it's just the timing of it all was just so weird, especially with that defense, with all the talent they've got. And Leonard Williams has maybe got a couple more really good years in him, and he's going to be getting to be an older player. I mean, this was your window to me these next couple years. And maybe it still ends up being their window if Sam Darnold outplays expectations, but and they have a run game to go with it. The defense is contender caliber. The problem is now that all these moves, can you make the offense be up to snuff enough that they can make it matter? That's really the bottom line.
Yeah. So if, like I said earlier, I've been tough on John Schneider on Twitter and Blue Sky the last couple of days, and I stand by most of it, softened on some of it. But one of my basic tenets in life is being willing to adjust opinions when new information becomes available. And I think it's also important to stress test our takes when it comes to, okay, if you had to go back to debate team, you have to make a compelling argument for the other side. How would you do it? So here's how I would do it. You're not locked in at quarterback, right? Like real money to Sam Darnold, but you can move off of it if it doesn't work out. If it does work out, great. You've got some flexibility. Doesn't preclude you from pursuing in either this draft or the next your quarterback of the future on a rookie contract. You saved real money by moving on from DK Metcalf and got the number 52 pick in return. Would I rather have Geno and DK? I would. But you've got Ernest Jones on a great contract. You've got basically your entire starting defense under contract right now, which not many teams can say. And to your point, top 5 points allowed over the last half of the season, which that follows the trend of Mike Macdonald defenses when he's taken over. You don't hire a Mike Macdonald unless your defense is struggling. So he's been taking over bad defenses for all of the reputation that the Ravens have enjoyed for the last 30 years as a great defense. They were bad when he showed up. I think 26th in points allowed his first season. It takes a season and a half for Mike Macdonald defenses to become elite. And Seattle's defense is at least trending that way. When it comes to the draft, taking all of that into account, and you look at the 18th pick in the first round, 2 picks in the second round now, 2 picks in the third round now, are you attacking specific positions of need, or are you taking the best player that's available to you in the first 2 days of the NFL draft this year?
Well, it depends how the next couple of days play out in free agency, because if Seattle does not go out and get an established guard or center here in free agency, and they aren't able to add a receiver along the line, then you do have some needs they're going to need to be addressed. And I know John Schneider's talked about not wanting to chase those. I think he did learn from that with LJ Collier, who was a mid-round pick that they picked at the end of the first round, and we saw what the results looked like. And ever since then, he's emphasized this, that he's going to be avoiding reaching for needs, and I think that's the way to go. But if you do have a position where you didn't really replace any of these other guys that have been gone, you didn't address the offensive line, then you end up in a position where you have to spend significant draft capital early on some of those positions. But I'm subscribing now. I still think they're going to get a guard. I think they are going to go out and spend some money on one. They've got
Who's left? Who's left? As of right now that we're recording, you mentioned Will Fries. Is there let's say we get the notification while we're on air that someone else signed Will Fries. Is there anybody else out there?
Well, the other guy that would make some sense potentially would be Tevin Jenkins, and the Chicago Bears aren't going to be bringing him back because they've signed everybody off the free agent market in this thing. Tevin Jenkins is another guy that I think, as a former converted tackle, would make some sense with his athleticism. I could see him being somebody that they take a look at. And Big Mekhi Becton, who had a career revival in Philadelphia, is another one. He has played for John Benton, the Seahawks offensive line coach, previously with the Jets. So there's a connection there already. The injury history and some of the concerns coming out of New York. But again, that's just the Jets. That's just what they do. Guys tend to leave there and get better. Philadelphia raved about him, and John Benton knows him well. So I could see Mekhi Becton being somebody that's looked at too. But certainly there's, I believe it's Stanley from the Steelers that was coming back from an injury. Or no, not Stanley, Daniels. I mixed these two guys up. Daniels, the former Utah player, is another one that has zone blocking capabilities, but he's coming back from a significant injury, so that might not be something that happens right away either. So the guard market's just moving slower than I thought it was going to. I thought these guys were going to be getting a lot of money thrown at them, and it was just going to be bang, bang, bang. And like the rest of this free agency period, it's kind of been lethargic.
Yeah, it has been. But also, it's not been a great free agency class, and you've seen that over the last couple of weeks with how many teams have locked up their restricted or unrestricted free agents to extensions because they know that what's out there isn't super tantalizing. However, I do want to ask you your thoughts on interior offensive linemen in this draft. Does this feel like a draft where, given Seattle's war chest of picks, they can get difference makers as rookies?
I think that it's a twofold thing. Center, I don't believe, is a great position in this draft class. Now, Jared Wilson from Georgia put on a show at the Combine, and if you watch the tape, the guy moves like that in games. He doesn't have a ton of experience. That might be a guy on day two they can look at, but generally this is not a great center class. I feel differently about the guard position, though. On day two, you could get Donovan Jacson from Ohio State, who I think is a plug-and-play type guy. Tate Ratledge, my favorite. He doesn't have a mullet. He's got the Ratledge. I love this dude, how he plays. And just the way he looks, like he just looks like the guy they need to bring on this offensive line. Physical, and he was a 9.98 relative athletic score coming out of Indy. I
saw that.
With the physicality that he plays with. So those two guys right there, day 2 jump out. There's several other quality guards. I feel like tackle and guard are deeper. Center is a position that's kind of light this year. So Seattle's got the opportunity to be able to go out and get some of these guys on day 2 that can help at the guard spots, and maybe that impacts the way that they approach free agency here. But again, I'm going to keep hammering this home, Jacson. They've got to go get a veteran, and they got to be willing to spend some money on a quality veteran instead of just rolling. I mean, they've drafted 7 dudes in the last 3 drafts, and we haven't seen the results on the field. At some point, you got to go get a proven commodity.
Yeah. And look, when Schneider has used high picks on offensive linemen, he's done well. There just haven't been that many times he's done that. It's Russell Okung, it's Charles Cross. Those guys hit. He made a trade for Dwayne Brown. That guy hit. He's had left tackle pretty well locked down. Hopefully right tackle is locked down too if Abe Lucas is healthy. But it just feels surreal to say what I'm about to say. But neither Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf are Seahawks right now. And Jacson Smith-Njigba is blossoming into exactly what I was telling everybody he was going to become. Even before he was drafted, when he was my number 1 player on the board for the Seahawks, they need wide receivers. I think Jake Bobo is number 2 right now. How comfortable are you with them using number 18 on a wide receiver in this draft?
It would be my number 2 thing for that pick right now behind offensive line. I think that if you can go out and get somebody like, if you can get Luther the Third, for some reason I'm not remembering his last name. I don't know why.
Burden, Luther Burden.
The Texas receiver as well. They've got a speedy receiver that I think would make a lot of sense. Matthew Golden would be a guy that would make some sense there. Maybe Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State, although I think he and Jackson Smith-Njigba have a lot of similar traits, and there'd be some redundancy there, both coming from Ohio State. But there are some guys there that would make sense there as far as receivers go. If somehow McMillan fell from Arizona, that'd be
no brainer. No brainer. He's the one guy where I'd almost even entertain trading up for. Hey, this is the nature of this show. Things are popping. Corbin is in high demand, as you might assume, given his role in all of this. And he's got some other appointments that he needs to get to and share his wisdom with. So we're going to let him go. But Corbin, before you go, real quick, you just started a brand new site that every Seattle sports fan should be tapped into. Tell me a little bit about that before you get out of here.
Yeah, EmeraldCitySpectrum.com. We've got 9 different pro and college sports teams covered with full-time reporters. Again, that's EmeraldCitySpectrum.com. Just $6 a month for a subscription. You get 9 teams of coverage and dozens of articles every single week. We're really fired up about it. Real journalism, no clickbait, and on-field credentialed access.
Something we've been starved for. I'm tapped in. Everyone listening, watching, you need to tap in not only to Corbin Smith on X and I'm not calling it X, on Twitter and on Blue Sky, but make sure that you are subscribed to Emerald City Spectrum as well. Corbin, thank you so much for your time. Go kill it, man. Show the world the work that you're doing. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jacson. Appreciate it.
Once again, a huge thank you to Corbin Smith, who gave us literally every minute he had, all the way up until his wall of interviews with local and national media outlets. Very, very grateful for the time that he carved out to join us here on Cigar Thoughts. As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on both at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts on Twitter and at CigarThoughtsNFL.com on Blue Sky. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts. Find the rest of our socials at CigarThoughtsNFL.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Glenfiddich Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup, and we are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. And one of the great things about a great Scotch is how well it plays with a good cigar. So once again, we do have our own special release of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of this show. The release of these Cigar Thought Stogies has been successful enough for us to continue offering them for the low price of $149. That's right, only $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thought cigars, which you can order directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year aged premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram or Blue Sky and we'll send you the details directly. The cigars come with a Boveda humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh whether you have a humidor or not. Of course, you can listen to this show at fieldgoals.com, and if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of the show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it's an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.